The morning the storm began, the lawns on Willow Creek Drive looked perfectly trimmed, as if the universe itself had decided to mock me with order while my life quietly crumbled underneath its manicured surface. You'd never guess that behind those white fences and hanging flower baskets, every family was juggling a secret like a lit match. Mine just happened to be cheating, Eric Bennett's to be exact. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I used to think Eric and I were one of those couples that made people whisper, "They've got it all." Big house, his and hers Teslas, matching smiles in the company newsletter. We'd become a sort of suburban advertisement for stability. But the thing about advertisements, they're always lying through perfect teeth. That morning, I was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through emails from the board, still in my robe, when Eric walked in, already dressed for work. He wore that tailored navy suit that always made him look like a trustworthy man. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. "Morning," he said casually, grabbing his protein shake from the fridge. I smiled, one of those practice smiles I'd learned from corporate meetings and cocktail parties. "Morning, early start." He didn't look up. "Big day, meeting with the Scottsdale client." Ah, the client. That word had recently taken on a new flavor. Sweet perfume and faint lipstick stains on receipts kind of flavor. I didn't say anything. Instead, I stirred my coffee and watched him fumble with his watch strap like he was running late. "You've been meeting that client a lot lately," I said softly. He hesitated, then smirked. "Networking, Laura. That's what successful people do." "Right," I said. "Networking. Must be exhausting. Keeping your contacts so personal." He froze for a second, but only a second. Then he gave me that corporate smile, the same one he used to disarm investors. "You're overthinking again. You always do that when you're stressed. If sarcasm could be bottled, I'd have flooded the room." "You're right, Eric. It's my stress, not your perfume." He left without replying. The sound of the door closing was oddly satisfying, like punctuation at the end of a badly written line. By 9, I was at Bennett Technologies, or as I like to call it lately, the family circus. Eric was the COO. His father, Richard Bennett, the CEO, had all the warmth of an iced-over lake and the humility of a god. I was head of marketing, which, in their eyes, meant I was there to make the company look prettier while they played Empire. I'd built the brand from scratch, crafted every campaign, landed key clients, even turned a loss-making quarter into a record profit. But in this world, merit was invisible next to a last name. I entered the boardroom to find Richard already there, along with Eric and a few directors. They stopped talking the moment I walked in. Nothing suspicious about that, of course. "Laura," Richard said, his smile tight enough to crack. "Good of you to join us." I took my seat. "It's 9 sharp." "Yes," he said, "and yet somehow it feels late." I ignored the jab. I'd learned long ago that sparring with him was like arguing with a courtroom portrait, useless and slightly unnerving. He cleared his throat. "We're making some structural changes, cutting costs. You understand the need for efficiency." "Of course," I said evenly. "Though we're up 22% this quarter. Hard to cut what's growing." His smile widened, and I swear I saw Eric glance down at the table. "Still, leadership must sometimes make difficult decisions." That's when he dropped it, my firing, publicly, in front of everyone. "Effective immediately, your position is terminated," Richard announced. "Pack your things. 5 minutes should suffice." For a moment, I simply stared at him. The silence stretched, thick enough to cut. Then something unexpected happened. I smiled. "Thank you," I said calmly, rising from my chair. "This has been educational." I gathered my files slowly, deliberately, as if I were leaving a coffee shop, not the company I'd built brick by brick. Then I noticed movement. Quiet, subtle. The head of product stood up, then HR, then operations. One by one, 22 people rose and followed me out the door. The entire board sat frozen, as if someone had unplugged reality. Richard's voice cracked slightly. "Sit down, all of you." But no one moved. As I reached the door, the legal director leaned toward Richard and whispered, "Call the lawyer, now." The door closed behind me like a seal snapping shut. I didn't cry, didn't scream. Instead, I went straight to my car, slipped on my sunglasses and laughed. Not because it was funny, nothing about humiliation is funny, but because I had seen this coming. I'd been preparing for months. See, when you live with a man like Eric, you learn to anticipate betrayal the way sailors watch for storms. Subtle shifts in tone, mysterious late meetings, sudden compliments that come from guilt, not affection. So I'd built something of my own, quietly, carefully. A small startup funded through savings and strategic partnerships. Something that didn't have the Bennett name on it, something they couldn't touch. By the time I got home that afternoon, Eric was waiting for me in the living room, pacing. His tie was loosened, his face flushed with that mix of panic and arrogance only men like him can master. "What did you do?" he demanded. I tilted my head. "Oh, you mean leaving gracefully after being humiliated in front of my colleagues? Or are we referring to the 22 people who decided they preferred working with a competent leader?" He ran a hand through his hair. "You're sabotaging the company." "Your company," I corrected, and technically, I was sabotaged first. "Stop being dramatic, Laura. You're making this personal." I laughed so hard it startled him. "Eric, you fired your own wife in public because your father told you to. It's already personal." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Don't forget who signs your paycheck." I met his gaze, steady and cold. "Not anymore, you don't." That night, while he slept in the guest room, oh yes, that had been the arrangement for weeks, I sent an email. A short, precise letter of resignation co-signed by 22 employees. Attached was our new company registration, legal filings, and a partnership deal with a major investor. I hit send and poured myself a glass of wine. Somewhere between the first sip and the second, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. 2 weeks later, Bennett Technologies made headlines. Employee walkouts, lawsuits pending, clients migrating to our startup faster than Eric could draft press statements. I heard from friends still inside that Richard nearly threw a chair when he found out. And Eric, my charming husband, was now spending late nights trying to patch a sinking ship with a coffee mug. But betrayal doesn't end with press releases. It lingers like a scent you can't wash off. One afternoon, as I walked through our new office, a rented loft with peeling paint and fresh ambition, I got a message from one of the employees who'd stayed behind at Bennett Tech. "You might want to see this," it said. Attached was a picture. Eric and the client, that same perfume and lipstick woman, at a private golf event, all smiles and cozy poses. I studied it carefully, zooming in on his hand resting on her back, the same hand that used to guide me through crowded galas. The rage that came wasn't explosive, it was surgical. That evening, I drove to the golf club. Not to cause a scene. Oh no. I wanted something quieter, something memorable. His lover's silver sports car was parked right out front, all polished and smug. I parked beside it, took a deep breath and smiled. Then I reached into my trunk, grabbed a small bottle of honey I'd brought, left over from my morning tea. A strange weapon, but trust me, it works. I poured it carefully over the windshield and wipers. Then, just for flair, sprinkled flour over it from a bag I'd grabbed at home. The result was a sticky, clumpy mess that would harden under the sun like concrete frosting. I stood back, admired my handiwork, and whispered, "Sweet success." When I got back into my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. The next day, social media was buzzing. Apparently, someone had caught the incident on camera. Her luxury car being towed, covered in what looked like breakfast gone rogue. The comments were viciously delightful. The suburb had its gossip for the week, and I had my satisfaction. Eric confronted me that night, of course. "Did you do this?" he demanded, waving his phone like evidence. I looked at him, poker-faced. "Do what? Take out the trash?" He glared at me, then sank into the sofa, rubbing his temples. "You've changed, Laura." I leaned on the doorway. "No, Eric, you just never bothered to notice who I was." He didn't respond, just stared at the floor like it might offer answers. Later, I sat on the porch watching the sunset, listening to the faint hum of sprinklers down the street. It struck me how ordinary everything looked. Perfect lawns, neighbors walking dogs. The same world, utterly unaware that beneath its calm surface, a quiet revolution had begun. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't one act. It's a performance. A series of precise moves, each one designed to dismantle the illusion the other person built around themselves. And I had a lot of moves left. As I went inside and locked the door, I caught my reflection in the glass, smiling, composed, unrecognizable even to myself. Somewhere in that reflection was the woman I used to be. Trusting, hopeful, careful. She was gone now, or maybe just finally awake. The house was silent except for the faint tick of the clock. It felt like the pause between thunder and rain. The air charged, waiting. Tomorrow I'd meet with the investors again. We were expanding faster than planned. The irony was delicious. Every contract lost by Bennett Tech was finding its way to my desk. And Eric? He'd soon learn that when you try to destroy someone who helped build your empire, you end up standing in the ruins alone. I turned off the lights and let the darkness settle, calm and deliberate. Somewhere outside, a car engine started, probably a neighbor heading to the gym. Or maybe fate itself, revving for the next chapter. Either way, the story wasn't over. Not yet, because I'd just begun writing my own. The thing about revenge is, it doesn't come all at once. It unfolds slowly, like a fog creeping across familiar streets until everything looks different and no one realizes when the change began. I woke up the next morning feeling oddly refreshed, as though the air itself had shifted in my favor. Maybe it was the sunlight sneaking through the blinds, or the silence of a house no longer pretending to be a home. Eric had already left for work, or whatever excuse he was using to avoid breakfast conversation. The coffee pot was still warm, which meant he'd been gone less than an hour. His mug was on the counter, a dark ring of residue marking the spot, like an unintentional goodbye note. I almost laughed. He'd always been obsessed with appearances, ironed shirts, perfect hair, spotless cars, but left behind small messes that revealed who he really was. By 8, I was already at the new office, a renovated space downtown that used to be an art studio. The brick walls were painted white, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, casting golden rectangles on the concrete floor. It smelled like ambition and fresh coffee, my favorite combination. "Morning, Laura," said Claire, my operations lead, already balancing 2 laptops and a phone. "The investors love the numbers. They're increasing the round." I smiled. "Of course they are. People love a comeback story." Claire grinned. "More like a coup." I didn't disagree. Our startup, Emberline Strategies, had officially launched a week ago. We weren't huge yet, but we were growing fast. Clients migrating from Bennett Technologies faster than Eric could patch the leaks. Word spread through the corporate grapevine. The woman they underestimated had built something sharper, faster, more ethical. By 10, I was in back-to-back meetings, reviewing new projects and hiring lists. Every conversation was electric, filled with ideas and urgency. It was intoxicating. The sense of movement, of finally being in control. But in the back of my mind, I could still feel the simmering tension from the previous week. The humiliation, the whispers, the betrayal. The suburb, for all its polished perfection, was buzzing with gossip. At lunch, I headed to a small cafe near the office. I liked sitting near the window where I could see everything: the cars, the pedestrians, the tiny dramas playing out on the street. Halfway through my salad, I saw a familiar face: Jennifer Lane. She'd been my neighbor for years and one of those women who treated gossip like oxygen. She spotted me immediately, eyes lighting up as if she'd just found a new diamond ring. "Laura, oh my goodness, I've been hearing so much about you." I forced a polite smile. "I'll bet you have." She slid into the seat across from me without asking. "Everyone's talking about that boardroom walkout. Richard Bennett must be losing his mind. And Eric, well, people say he's not taking it well." I stirred my coffee. "Eric's always been dramatic." Jennifer leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I also heard his friend isn't happy. The one from the golf event. Apparently her car was, how did they say it? Decorated." "Decorated," I repeated, biting back a smirk. "How festive." Jennifer giggled like a teenager sharing forbidden secrets. "You always did have style. Anyway, I told everyone you were too classy for all that nonsense." "Oh, I am," I said, smiling sweetly. "But it's nice that she's getting the attention she wanted." Jennifer's eyes widened, clearly torn between admiration and fear. That was fine by me. Fear had its uses. After she left, I finished my lunch slowly, savoring the calm. I'd learned something crucial. Suburban gossip was like wildfire. It needed only one spark, and I had more than enough matches. That evening, I stopped by the old neighborhood store to pick up wine, and the clerk, an older man named Hal, who knew everyone's business, raised his eyebrows. "You're the Bennett lady, right? Or used to be?" I smiled. "Still me, Hal, just less attached." He nodded sagely. "Heard the big company's in trouble. People say you walked out and took half the talent with you." I shrugged. "Half? That's generous. It was more like 2/3. He laughed. "Good for you, honey. Sometimes people forget who really builds things." I liked Hal. He didn't ask for the messy details. He just understood the simple truth. Sometimes the one holding everything together is the first to get pushed aside. When I got home that night, Eric's car wasn't in the driveway. He was probably out trying to patch his life together, or patch up with his little client. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the back porch, staring at the dark outline of our manicured yard. The sprinklers clicked on, hissing softly. It was strange, watching a house you built together turn into something foreign. Every brick, every lamp, every photo on the wall suddenly looked like evidence from a life I didn't remember agreeing to live. At some point, headlights swept across the driveway. Eric's car pulled in, slower than usual. He got out looking tired, creased shirt, loosened tie, the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting battles you started yourself. He paused when he saw me sitting there. "You're still up." "Observation skills on point," I said dryly. He ignored the jab and sat opposite me. "You're really proud of yourself, aren't you? The company's collapsing, investors are pulling out, my father's threatening lawsuits. Your father should have thought of that before publicly firing his marketing head in front of her team," I interrupted. He leaned forward. "You sabotaged us." I smiled faintly. "No, Eric, you underestimated me. There's a difference." He rubbed his temples. "You've changed. You're enjoying this." I tilted my head. "Enjoying? Maybe. It's refreshing to see fairness, even if it arrives fashionably late." He sighed and stood up, pacing like a man cornered in his own living room. "You know what your problem is? You can't let go. You always have to win." I took another sip of wine, my tone calm. "And you always have to cheat. On rules, on people, on reality." He froze, eyes flicking toward me. I could see it. Panic, shame, anger, all swirling under that polished surface. "Laura," he started, but I cut him off. "Save it. I don't need confessions or apologies. Just stay out of my way." He left without another word, the front door clicking shut behind him. As soon as I heard his car disappear, I exhaled, and let the silence settle again. My heart wasn't racing. It was methodical, steady. Revenge was starting to feel less like anger and more like balance being restored. 2 days later, I got a call from Claire. "Laura, you need to see this." She sent a file, screenshots of a message thread. Apparently, Eric had been trying to lure a few of our employees back, offering them bonuses and positions at Bennett Tech. Classic move. "Forward them to legal," I said calmly, "and tell the team lunch is on me today." By noon, I'd booked a food truck outside the office, serving tacos and iced tea. The mood was light, full of laughter and energy. That was the difference between our company and theirs. Ours had purpose, theirs had panic. Still, I wanted to make a point, so I sent Eric a polite email, short, professional, with one attached file. A cease and desist drafted by our lawyer regarding employee solicitation. 10 minutes later, he called. I didn't answer. An hour after that, he showed up at the office. The receptionist looked nervous as he entered. "He says he just wants a minute," she whispered. I nodded. "Fine. Send him in." He walked into my office looking slightly desperate, which was new for him. The confidence was cracking. "Laura, we need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. "About the weather?" I asked, glancing up from my screen. "About this nonsense. The lawyers, the smear campaigns, the employees. You're turning everyone against me." "Eric, I didn't have to turn anyone. They simply saw who you were." He clenched his fists, trying to keep his composure. "You're playing a dangerous game." I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands. "You should know, Eric. You taught me how to play." For a moment, he looked like he might argue, but instead, he exhaled heavily and turned toward the window. "You think this will make you happy?" I didn't answer right away. I stood, walked around the desk, and looked him in the eye. "No, it makes me free." He left without another word, but I could tell something had shifted. The game wasn't over. It had just evolved. That night, I went for a drive through Willow Creek. Every house glowed with soft light, every window framing a picture-perfect life. I wondered how many of those homes were just like mine, pretty on the outside, cracking inside. The irony was almost poetic. When I returned home, I noticed something odd. Eric's car was there, but the house was dark. Inside, the smell of his cologne lingered faintly. On the counter, there was a note in his handwriting. "We need to talk tomorrow. No lawyers." I smiled, folded the note and tucked it into my planner. The old Laura would have been nervous. The new one was curious. The next morning, before that talk could happen, news broke. Bennett Technologies was facing an investigation for misuse of funds. It wasn't my doing, not directly, anyway. But one of the employees who'd walked out had apparently taken the company's creative files with them. The authorities were asking questions. Eric tried to call again. I let it ring. By noon, the press had picked up the story. I was standing by the office window, coffee in hand, when Claire walked in, grinning. "You're trending," she said. I looked out at the skyline, feeling the strange calm of victory. "Good. Let's make sure we stay there." She laughed. "What's next?" I smiled faintly. "Oh, I have a few more surprises." That evening, as the city lights flickered on, I felt something new stir inside me. Not rage, not satisfaction, but power. Real, tangible power. The kind that comes when you stop waiting for justice and start creating your own version of it. I looked at my reflection in the window again. The same woman, same face, but something in her eyes had changed. There was sharpness now, precision. This wasn't just payback anymore. It was transformation. And Eric had no idea what was coming next. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious. Those days were gone. But because my mind wouldn't stop working. Revenge is a strange kind of motivation. It doesn't tire you. It fuels you. Every thought becomes sharper, every move more deliberate. By dawn, I had already mapped out my next step. Eric wanted to talk. No lawyers, he'd said, which was as trustworthy as a fox promising to guard a chicken coop. Still, I agreed. The setting, of course, would be mine to choose. I invited him to a small coffee shop near the lake, neutral ground, public, calm, impossible for him to stage one of his manipulative, heartfelt moments. When he arrived, he looked worn. His expensive suit didn't hide the exhaustion underneath. Creased collar, dull eyes, the faint smell of too many sleepless nights. He tried to smile. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, sitting down across from me. "I figured I'd give you 5 minutes," I said, sipping my coffee. "Just like your father gave me." He flinched. "Laura, please, don't turn this into a competition." "Oh, I'm not competing, Eric. I already won." He sighed and leaned forward. "You've made your point. You're brilliant, you're independent, you're furious, I get it. But you've destroyed our reputation, our business." "Correction," I interrupted. "Your father's business. I built mine from scratch." He rubbed his temples. "You're really not going to let this go, are you?" I smiled. "Eric, you don't let go of betrayal. You outgrow it." He looked at me for a long moment, maybe realizing that the woman across from him wasn't the same one who used to pack his lunch and praise his presentations. Finally, he said quietly, "You've changed." "I had to," I replied. "Survival demands it." He hesitated. "Look, I know things got messy, but maybe we can find some middle ground. I can talk to my father, get you a settlement." I laughed, sharp and short. "You think I want a settlement? I don't need hush money, Eric. I'm not your liability." His jaw tightened. "You're making this impossible." "Good," I said softly. "That's the point." He didn't stay long after that. The conversation ended with him muttering something about regretting this someday. I almost thanked him for the preview of what was already happening. When he left, I sat there for a while, watching the lake shimmer in the morning light. It was peaceful, deceptively so. The kind of peace that comes before a storm you've scheduled yourself. Later that afternoon, I drove back to our neighborhood. The sidewalks were crowded with dog walkers and joggers, everyone pretending not to notice each other's business while knowing every single detail. Typical. As I turned into Willow Creek Drive, I saw her, the client. Her name, I'd recently learned through a mutual acquaintance, was Vanessa Lowell. Early 30s, fake laugh, all heels and ambition. She was standing in her driveway, talking animatedly into her phone. And there it was, Eric's car parked right beside hers. I pulled over half a block away, watching. No yelling, no tears, just observation. I wanted to see, not react. That's where people like Eric always made their mistake. They acted before thinking. I preferred precision. Eventually, he came out of her house, adjusting his tie, face set in that performative calm he used to practice in mirrors before meetings. She touched his arm as he spoke, smiling up at him like he'd hung the moon. I almost laughed. He'd always loved being adored. It filled the holes where integrity should have been. I waited until they left separately. Then I got out of my car, walked over to hers, and left a small envelope tucked under her windshield wiper. Inside was a single photo, her and Eric from the golf event, plus a business card from Bennett Technologies. On the back, I'd written, "You're in the same league now, congratulations." Petty? Maybe, but effective. The next day, Claire burst into my office mid-meeting. "Laura, you're going to love this," she said, grinning. She handed me her phone. On the screen was a video, Vanessa arguing loudly in Bennett Technologies' parking lot, throwing her ID badge on the ground. Someone had filmed it from the window. The clip was already circulating among the staff. Apparently, she confronted Eric and Richard about something, Claire said. Security had to step in. I watched the video twice, then handed the phone back. "Perfect," I said. "Let them implode." The dominoes were falling exactly as planned, and I hadn't lifted a finger beyond honesty and timing. That's what people never understood about revenge. it doesn't require fire. Sometimes, all it takes is letting people reveal themselves. By the following week, my company had secured 2 new contracts previously held by Bennett Tech. Investors were calling. The press wanted interviews. I declined them all. I preferred mystery to exposure. It made people curious, and curiosity was free publicity. Still, not everything was business. There was the matter of my reputation in the neighborhood, which, according to Jennifer Lane and her flock of porch philosophers, had become legendary. The way they told it, I'd outsmarted the Bennetts with a single email and a smirk. I didn't bother correcting them. Let the myth grow. It worked in my favor. One evening, as I pulled into my driveway, I saw Richard Bennett's car parked across the street. My pulse quickened, but not from fear, from curiosity. He stepped out slowly, expensive suit perfectly pressed, expression as sharp as ever. "Laura," he said, approaching with measured calm. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms. "Funny, that's becoming a family catchphrase." He didn't smile. "You've made a spectacle of us. Eric's a mess. Our board's in chaos. Investors are calling me every hour." "What exactly do you want?" I tilted my head. "You mean besides dignity? Because that ship sailed the moment you tried to humiliate me." He took a step closer. "You've proven your point. You're competent. You're successful. But this crusade—" "Crusade?" I interrupted. "No, Richard. This is clean-up. You made the mess." His eyes narrowed. "Be careful, Laura. You're playing with people who have power." "Correction," I said, smiling. "Had power." He stared at me for a long second, then turned and walked away without another word. The quiet sound of his car door closing was the sweetest applause I'd ever heard. That night, I poured a glass of wine and watched the city lights through my living room window. My house felt different now, not haunted by memories, but filled with possibility. I should have felt satisfied, but part of me still hummed with unfinished energy, like a string pulled too tight. The victory wasn't complete yet, not until Eric understood what it truly meant to lose everything. The next morning, I set it in motion. I called a contact at the local paper, a journalist who owed me a favor from my marketing days. I gave her a simple tip. Investigate how Bennett Technologies handled its employee terminations and contracts. You'll find something interesting. By evening, her article was live. Headline: Toxic Leadership, Inside the Collapse of Bennett Technologies. It was factual, precise, and devastating. No lies, no exaggerations. Just the truth, exposed. Eric called 6 times. I didn't answer. The next day, he showed up at my door again, looking worse than before, shirt untucked, eyes hollow. He didn't even try to sound composed this time. "Laura, please. You're ruining everything." I leaned on the doorframe. "No, Eric, I'm restoring balance." He shook his head. "You think this makes you strong? You think you're the hero here?" I met his eyes calmly. "No, I'm just someone who stopped letting people walk over her." He stared at me, searching for some sign of the woman he used to manipulate. I didn't give him any. Eventually, he turned and walked away. Shoulders slumped, the sound of his steps fading down the porch. I closed the door quietly and exhaled. The air felt clean again. Later that night, as I sat by the window, I saw his car drive past once, then again, slower this time. Maybe he thought he could still reason with me. Maybe he was just trying to understand how it had all slipped away. Either way, it didn't matter. The story had reached its climax, and I was finally holding the pen. Still, I knew better than to get comfortable. Men like Eric and Richard didn't vanish quietly. They regrouped. They plotted. But so did I. And this time, I wasn't the one reacting. I was leading. As I turned off the lights and the house went still, I smiled to myself. Somewhere out there, my enemies were scrambling to survive the chaos they'd created, and I was just getting started. The following morning started with thunder, the kind that rolled across the horizon before sunrise, and rattled the windows like a warning. It fit my mood perfectly. The storm had shifted from metaphor to reality, and I was standing right in the middle of it, holding the umbrella and the lightning rod at once. By 7, my phone was already lighting up. Messages from Claire, reporters, and even former Bennett Tech employees. The article had hit harder than anyone expected. Apparently, several vendors had frozen their contracts with the company pending ethics clarification. Translation: no one wanted to be associated with a sinking ship. When I got to the office, the energy was electric. People whispered, half shocked and half thrilled, as if we'd just pulled off a corporate heist in broad daylight. Claire met me at the door with 2 cups of coffee. "You've seen the headlines?" she asked. "Every single one," I said, taking a sip. And I have to admit, I expected slower fallout. "Apparently Eric and Richard are at each other's throats," she said. "A source inside says the board might vote to remove them both." I smiled faintly. "There's a poetic rhythm to that." She grinned. "You really planned all this, didn't you?" "Planned," I said. "No, I just stopped cleaning up their mess." That afternoon, I had a meeting scheduled with one of our biggest new clients, a logistics firm that had just left Bennett Tech. As I walked them through our marketing proposal, I noticed how easily I could focus again. My thoughts used to spin, distracted by emotion, by betrayal, by the urge to confront. Now everything was clear, clean, purposeful. After the meeting, Claire lingered. "You're quiet," she said. "You should be celebrating." "Oh, I am," I said. "Just not out loud." She hesitated. "You know this isn't just about business anymore, right?" I looked up. "It started with betrayal, Claire. It ends with freedom. Everything else is logistics." That evening, as the storm cleared, I drove through town and past Bennett Technologies headquarters. The once pristine building now had protest signs outside, employees demanding unpaid bonuses and severance. I parked across the street for a moment, watching. Eric came out of the front doors, flanked by 2 executives, his face pale under the streetlights. He didn't see me, but I saw him, clearly. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in the way people do when their power evaporates, a hollow echo of authority. I rolled down my window just enough to hear snippets of the shouting, accusations, excuses, panic. I didn't need to intervene. That was the beauty of it. The truth was doing the work for me. The next day brought a new kind of escalation. My lawyer, a calm woman named Renee, called mid-morning. "Laura, I thought you'd want to know. Bennett Tech's legal team just requested a meeting. They're looking for settlement discussions." I laughed softly. Of course they are. When everything collapses, they want to negotiate with the person they underestimated. "Do you want me to set it up?" "Yes," I said, "and make sure it's in our office. I want them to see what competence looks like." The meeting was set for Friday. When the day came, I wore black, sleek, unassuming, but sharp enough to cut through tension. The conference room was glass-walled and sunlit, filled with quiet confidence. Eric and Richard arrived together, both looking like men who had lost the plot. Richard started first. "Laura, let's be practical. This legal war helps no one." "Disagree," I said. "It's been incredibly productive for me." Eric shifted uncomfortably. "We're willing to make a formal settlement, financial compensation, non-disparagement clauses." I raised a hand. "Stop. I'm not interested in silence or money. I'm interested in fairness." Richard frowned. "Then what do you want?" I leaned forward slightly. "A public acknowledgement that what happened in that boardroom was illegal, unethical, and personal. I want an official retraction, signed by you, Richard, and distributed to every major partner." He blinked. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I am," I said calmly. "Or we can proceed with the lawsuit and let discovery expose everything you've both been hiding. The fake invoices, the nepotism, the misuse of employee funds for client entertainment." Eric's head snapped up. "You wouldn't." "Try me," I said. The silence stretched. Richard's face went grey. Finally, he muttered, "We'll consider it." "Do that," I said, standing. "You've got 48 hours. As they left, Eric glanced back at me. For a moment, his expression wasn't angry or desperate. It was something closer to recognition. He finally understood that I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't the dutiful wife anymore. I was the storm. The next morning, the retraction hit the press. Polite corporate phrasing, of course, but the message was unmistakable. Bennett Technologies acknowledges mishandling of executive employment termination and apologizes for internal misconduct. By noon, their stock plummeted another 8%. When Claire showed me the article, I smiled but said nothing. Satisfaction didn't need words. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Vanessa, the client. She looked shaken, her usual confidence replaced by something fragile. She stood in the lobby, holding a folder and a nervous smile. "I just need 5 minutes," she said. "Please." Against my better judgment, I agreed. She stepped into my office, glancing around like she was walking into a confessional. "I didn't know," she said quickly, "about the company, about what they were doing to you. Eric told me he said you'd left for personal reasons." I studied her carefully. She was scared, but not manipulative. "You believed him?" "I wanted to," she admitted, "but he's not who I thought he was." I folded my arms. Few men are. She hesitated, then opened the folder. This is what I came for. Inside were printed emails, internal communications between Eric, Richard, and 2 contractors, evidence of them diverting company funds to cover personal travel and entertainment expenses. "Why bring this to me?" I asked. "Because he blamed you," she said quietly. "Said you leaked those first reports, and now everyone's turning on each other. I figured you'd know what to do with this." I stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you." She gave a small, sad smile. "For what it's worth, I think you're the only one who ever scared him." After she left, I sat alone, flipping through the documents. They were exactly what I needed. The final piece to close the circle. With these, the lawsuit would be airtight. But more than that, it was the poetic conclusion to a story that had started in arrogance and ended in ruin. That night, I drove to the lake again. The water reflected the city lights, calm and endless. The air smelled like rain and resolution. For the first time in months, I felt something resembling peace. Not forgiveness, not sympathy, just the quiet understanding that justice had run its course. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You've won. Hope it was worth it." No name, but I didn't need one. I smiled faintly, deleted the message and whispered to the night, every second. Behind me, thunder rumbled again, low and distant, like applause from the universe itself. And this time, I didn't look back. By the time the second wave of news broke, Willow Creek Drive had turned into an amphitheater of whispers. The neighborhood group chat was on fire. Every driveway became a stage for scandal. Every mailbox was a podium for someone's opinion. The Bennetts, once the crown jewel of this perfectly trimmed suburb, had become the week's hottest gossip export. From my kitchen window, I watched 2 of my neighbors, Patty and Mark, pretending to discuss the lawn service schedule while clearly dissecting the headlines. Their voices carried through the still air. "Said the company's facing charges now," Patty was saying, in that syrupy tone people use when pretending to be concerned. Mark chuckled. "Never thought the Bennetts would go down like that. His wife, what's her name? Laura? She's got grit. You can't buy that kind of payback." Grit. That word made me smile. It wasn't revenge or brilliance or ruthlessness. It was grit. I'd take it. I picked up the folded newspaper from the counter. The front page story read, "Corporate power couple implodes amid scandal." The photo beneath it captured Eric and Richard stepping out of the courthouse, faces tight and drawn under the glare of camera flashes. Their matching expressions, equal parts disbelief and forced dignity, Could have been artwork titled Hubris in 2 generations. It should have been satisfying. And it was, at least for a while. But satisfaction has an expiration date. After a few minutes, it fades into something quieter, heavier, something that looks suspiciously like reflection. Still, I wasn't finished. I'd promised myself that closure wouldn't come from headlines or humiliation. It would come when they couldn't rise again, not out of vengeance, but to ensure that what they'd done to me would never happen to anyone else. That afternoon, I drove downtown to meet Renee. My lawyer was as precise as a scalpel, quiet, methodical, sharp. She was already waiting in the glass-walled conference room, her laptop open, and a folder marked confidential between 2 cups of coffee. "Morning," she said, offering me one of the cups. "Double shot. You'll need it." I sat, smoothing my jacket. "What's the update?" She adjusted her glasses. "They've withdrawn from settlement talks. Richard thinks he can outlast the scandal. He's cutting costs and trying to frame everything as a temporary downturn. Classic move." "Delusional move," I said. "Exactly," Renee replied, smiling faintly. "But thanks to what Vanessa brought you, the internal expense reports, and those travel invoices, we have grounds to proceed with full discovery. Once that starts, their entire financial trail becomes public." I leaned back, nodding slowly. "Good. I want it airtight. I don't want them to spin a redemption arc out of this." Renee studied me for a moment, her pen tapping lightly on the table. "You've thought this through to the molecule." "It's not about thinking," I said. "It's about making sure truth doesn't get buried under spin. I lived that once." She nodded. "Then we're aligned." After the meeting, I stayed a while, watching the downtown skyline shimmer through the window. My reflection merged with the city lights, half corporate warrior, half ghost of the woman who'd once trusted too easily. The lines on my face were sharper now, not from age, but from awareness. That evening, as I returned home, my phone buzzed. An email. Subject line: "Dinner. One last conversation." From Eric. I stared at the screen for a long minute. My first instinct was to delete it. Then, against all logic, curiosity won. After all, closure doesn't always arrive in legal filings. Sometimes, it walks in wearing a suit and regret. The restaurant was one of those lakeside places we used to go when we still believed in us. White linen tables, overpriced salads, a pianist in the corner pretending to play softly enough to make conversation feel private. The hostess recognized me instantly, her smile polite but knowing. "Right this way, Mrs. Bennett," she said, then hesitated. "Or is it Ms. now?" "Ms.," I said, smiling without warmth. "And it's just Laura." Eric was already there, sitting by the window, nursing a half-empty glass of whiskey. He looked older, greyer, thinner, the way people do when control slips from their fingers. When he saw me, he tried to smile. "Laura," he said, standing halfway before sitting again. "Thanks for coming." I took my seat. "You said 5 minutes." He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Still punctual as ever." "Efficiency never hurt anyone," I said. "Except you, apparently." He flinched but didn't argue. "Look, I didn't ask you here to fight." "Then what? Apologize? Negotiate? Lecture me about forgiveness?" He shook his head. "I just need to understand why you pushed this far." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean, why I didn't stay quiet after you and your father publicly fired me, humiliated me, and treated me like a disposable asset?" "Laura, I made mistakes. We both did." "Don't rewrite this into a duet," I said sharply. "You composed the melody. I just changed the rhythm." He looked away, exhaling slowly. "You always had that edge when you were angry. It's strange, I missed it." "That's not nostalgia," I said. "That's guilt pretending to be memory." He didn't speak for a moment. The pianist shifted to a new song, something slow and melancholic. Finally, Eric said, "You've won. You got everything you wanted. The company's gone. My reputation's gone. My father's hiding from the press. You burned it all down. Isn't that enough?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "No, Eric. Enough is when people like you stop believing they can build empires on loyalty and lies. Enough is when you realize that what you called success was just exploitation in a tailored suit." He stared at me, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "You're not the same person anymore." "I had to evolve," I said quietly. "People only grow after they're forced to stand outside the fire they helped build." He gave a small, tired smile. "You sound like your mother." I met his gaze evenly. "You wouldn't know. You never bothered to listen when she warned you about me." He blinked. "She warned me?" "Oh, yes," I said, swirling my wine. She said, "Don't ever underestimate Laura's quiet. You should have listened." We sat in silence for a while after that. When I finally stood to leave, Eric said softly, "You know, I really thought I could fix it. I thought if I just kept control of the company, I could make things right." "That's your problem," I said. "You mistake control for redemption." Outside, the night air was heavy with humidity and the smell of rain. I walked along the waterfront for a while, my reflection following me in the glass of the restaurant windows. For the first time, I didn't feel like an extra in someone else's story. I was the author, the editor, and the publisher, all at once. The next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. Claire's name lit up the screen. "Laura, you're going to want to see this," she said, half breathless. "What is it?" "It's everywhere, every outlet. Someone leaked those internal files from Bennett Technologies, the ones Vanessa brought you." I sat up, heart steady but alert. And it's over. The headline reads, "Whistleblower Evidence Links Bennett Executives to Financial Misconduct. It's done. They're finished." For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I just stared out the window at the slow wash of dawn light spilling over the street. "Send me the link," I said finally. I read the article twice. It was thorough, sourced, impossible to spin. The Bennetts were finished, not by rumor, not by speculation, but by documented truth. By noon, Emberline Strategies was buzzing. The staff clapped quietly when I walked in, the air thick with energy and vindication. Someone brought champagne. Claire raised her glass. "To Laura," she said, "the woman who rewrote the rule book." I smiled, lifted my glass and said only, "To truth." But inside, it felt different, not triumphant, not even satisfying. Just still. Later, when I got home, the house felt cavernous again, full of echoes and light. I poured a glass of wine and sank onto the couch, letting silence settle around me. For the first time, I didn't feel the weight of anger in the room. Just air. Clean, light air. Then I heard it, faint at first, like the sound of gravel under shoes. I walked to the front window. Eric's car was parked across the street. He was sitting there, unmoving, head resting on the steering wheel. Rain began to fall, small droplets tapping against the windshield. He didn't move for nearly 10 minutes. Then the car engine started, headlights cutting through the mist, and he drove away. I stood there until the taillights disappeared. No tears, no trembling, no urge to chase or shout, just calm. A strange, steady calm that felt like the real ending. The next morning, I called Renee. "File the closing motion," I said. She hesitated. "You're sure? This would officially end it." "Yes," I said. "We're done." After hanging up, I opened the windows. The air smelled of wet grass and new beginnings. Somewhere down the street, I heard the faint hum of sprinklers and laughter. Normal, ordinary sounds I hadn't noticed in months. By afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. The sun was warm, the sidewalks damp, the neighborhood buzzing with quiet curiosity. Every neighbor who passed gave me the same polite smile, part admiration, part unease. Patty waved from her porch. "Laura, you're glowing, dear. Starting fresh?" I smiled back. "You could say that." She tilted her head. So, was it worth it? I paused. The breeze lifted a strand of hair from my face. Every single second, I said, and kept walking. When I reached the corner, I looked back once. The houses stood quiet, lined up like obedient secrets. The same lawns, the same façades, but everything behind them had shifted. Not just mine, everyone's. Because when one perfect illusion cracks, people start seeing the fissures in their own. That night, I poured the last of the wine and sat on the porch under the porch light, barefoot, watching the sky darken. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled faintly. Not a storm, just a reminder that the air still had movement left in it. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even thinking about Eric or Richard or the company. My thoughts were elsewhere, on new contracts, on the office expansion, on maybe repainting the kitchen. Ordinary things, real things. The story had ended exactly where it needed to. No redemption, no tragedy, just consequence. And for once, consequence felt like peace. I smiled into the quiet, the porch light flickering above me. The world had turned, and I had turned with it. Stronger, sharper, unbreakable. And when the thunder rolled again, low and distant, it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like applause. Peace, I've learned, doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with grand gestures, poetic sunsets, or sweeping music. It creeps in quietly, half unnoticed, through the ordinary moments you once took for granted. The click of the kettle, the soft hum of a refrigerator, the subtle comfort of your own breathing when you finally stop waiting for the next disaster. That's how it came to me, piece by piece. Weeks had passed since the final article broke, and Bennett Technologies had been reduced to ashes. The once mighty empire that used to dominate business headlines was now a cautionary tale whispered among executives over coffee. Don't pull a Bennett. The company's stock had flatlined. The board had resigned. And the last I heard, Richard had retreated to Arizona to focus on his health. Eric, though, he'd gone silent. No public statements, no interviews, no new ventures. Just vanished. It was strange, really. For years I'd lived under the constant sound of his presence, his confident voice, his heavy footsteps, his need to fill every room with his certainty. Now there was nothing, not even a rumor. I should have felt free, and I did mostly. But freedom after captivity is a disorienting thing. You expect it to feel like flight. Instead, it feels like gravity suddenly released, and you're not sure where to land. Emberline strategies had exploded beyond what any of us imagined. The week after the scandal, clients poured in like water through open gates. We had to lease another floor downtown just to accommodate the growth. The staff had started calling the new floor the Rebellion, a half-joke about our collective exodus from the Bennett's kingdom. On paper, I was thriving. In practice, I was adjusting. One evening, after a 12-hour day of meetings and press calls, I stayed behind at the office long after everyone had left. The city outside the glass walls glowed faintly, a quilt of gold squares against the dusk. I walked from desk to desk, touching things absent-mindedly, the sleek conference table, the whiteboard covered in scribbles, the framed photo of our launch day. It was hard not to think about how it started. Me, packing up my box at Bennett Tech, while 22 people followed me out the door. Back then, I'd been humiliated but determined. Now, I was unbreakable, but tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that comes from finishing a marathon you didn't sign up for. My phone buzzed on the desk. Claire. You left your laptop charger again, boss. Want me to drop it off tomorrow? I smiled. Keep it. Maybe I'll finally take a night off. You? Off? I'll believe it when I see it. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent so much time fighting that I didn't know how to just exist. When I finally got home, the house greeted me with its usual silence. It wasn't an empty silence anymore. It was peaceful, clean, owned. I poured a glass of wine and walked barefoot to the back porch. The air was cool, the kind of perfect stillness that suburban nights seem to manufacture just to tease your thoughts. I sat down and listened, to sprinklers hissing somewhere down the block, to the faint hum of crickets, to the quiet rhythm of my own life continuing. This was mine now, entirely mine. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the mail slot clattering. I padded to the door in my robe and picked up the stack of envelopes, bills, junk flyers, one sleek white letter with no return address. The paper was thick, expensive, and the handwriting was unmistakable. Eric. I stood there for a long moment, the letter heavy in my hands. Part of me wanted to toss it straight into the recycling bin. But curiosity, as always, is a stubborn thing. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no dramatic apology. Just this. Laura, I've been staying in a small cabin outside Portland. No company, no suits, no titles. Just space. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you that you were right about everything. About me. About what we built. It's strange, but for the first time, I understand what freedom feels like. You once told me that truth always collects its debts. Consider them paid. E. I folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. No tears, no nostalgia. Just an odd, quiet understanding that some stories don't need epilogues. They just need silence. Over the next few weeks, life in Willow Creek began to feel like something out of a dark comedy. The same neighbors who once whispered about that public firing now smiled at me with newfound admiration. Jennifer Lane stopped pretending she wasn't watching me when I jogged in the mornings. Patty from across the street brought me muffins just because. The suburb was back to its usual routine: dog walkers, gardeners, gossip. But something had changed. The perfection felt less real now, like everyone was finally aware of how fragile their illusions were. One Friday evening, I received an invitation in the mail, the annual Willow Creek Garden Gala. The very event I used to attend with Eric, both of us smiling through clenched teeth while pretending to adore the neighborhood's small talk. I hadn't gone since everything happened. This year I decided to. I wore a simple black dress, not the kind that shouts for attention, but the kind that commands it anyway. When I arrived, heads turned. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Jennifer practically tripped over her glass trying to greet me first. "Laura, you look amazing," she said, eyes sparkling with a mix of awe and fear. "Everyone's been waiting to see if you'd come this year." I smiled, taking a sip of champagne. "Well, I thought I'd check in, make sure everyone's surviving without the Bennett's empire funding the wine donations." Her laugh came out nervous and high-pitched. "Oh, you're terrible," she said, though her tone was pure delight. The event was exactly as I remembered: manicured hedges, string lights, and people pretending their marriages weren't one argument from unraveling. I moved through the crowd easily now, like someone immune to the performance. Halfway through the night, as the small talk blurred into background noise, I stepped away from the crowd to the edge of the garden. The fountain sparkled under the lights, its surface trembling slightly in the evening breeze. For the first time in a long while, I felt calm. That's when I heard his voice. "You know, I always thought you'd leave this place." I turned. Richard Bennett stood there, holding a glass of bourbon, his posture still proud but weaker somehow. Like a statue with fine cracks no one bothered to repair. His once imposing presence had faded into something smaller, almost human. "Richard," I said, "didn't expect to see you mingling with the common folk." He gave a dry laugh. "Old habits die hard." "I suppose empires do, too." He took a sip, regarding me with a look I couldn't quite read. "You won, Laura." "No," I said, "I just stopped losing." He nodded slowly, the movement deliberate, as if conceding a long, overdue truth. "I underestimated you. I always did. You were the only one in that company who saw the cracks before they split open, and instead of fixing them, I mocked you for noticing." "You did worse than mock me," I said quietly. You made sure the world saw me fail. His eyes softened slightly. And the world saw you rise. That's balance, I suppose. Balance, I repeated, half smiling. Funny word coming from a man who built his career on tipping the scales. He didn't deny it. You've done well. Emberline is impressive. Investors talk about you like you're a force of nature. Then they're paying attention. He looked down at his glass, swirling the amber liquid. Eric told me he wrote to you. I received it. And? I read it, I said. Then I got back to work. That seemed to sting him, but he smiled faintly. You always were the practical one. I suppose I should say thank you. For what? For destroying us, he said simply. You did what no one else could. You held up a mirror. It wasn't revenge, it was revelation. I met his gaze evenly. Don't romanticize it, Richard. It was strategy. He inclined his head slightly, like a king acknowledging defeat. Then consider this my last piece of advice. Don't let power become your reflection. It will change you. It already has, I said, and turned to leave. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on me. Not angry, not bitter, but haunted. Maybe he finally understood what it felt like to be powerless in a world that worships control. Outside, the night air was crisp and clear. I could hear faint laughter from the gala behind me, but it already felt distant, irrelevant. I got into my car, turned the key, and sat for a moment before starting the engine. The dashboard clock read 10:17 p.m. The world outside was perfectly still. For reasons I couldn't explain, I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I took the long route through the winding hills on the edge of town. The lights of the city stretched out below, like a constellation, each glow a reminder of something rebuilt, something redeemed, something still standing. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the porch light flicked on automatically, casting a soft halo across the front steps. The house looked peaceful again, as if it had finally forgiven the chaos it once contained. Inside, I set my keys on the counter and poured a glass of water instead of wine. I wasn't celebrating anymore. I didn't need to. I wandered through the house slowly, touching the things I'd once associated with pain. The framed photos, the polished dining table, the office where I'd cried quietly after the board meeting that ended my career. They didn't hurt anymore. They were just mine. In the living room, I stopped by the old answering machine, Eric's stubborn relic. I hadn't unplugged it, maybe out of habit or irony. The light wasn't blinking anymore. The message he left weeks ago had already faded into memory. I pressed the button anyway. Nothing but static, a fitting metaphor. The clock ticked softly. Somewhere outside, a dog barked, and a car passed by, its headlights slicing briefly across the window. The normalcy of it all was almost surreal. I sat down on the couch and exhaled deeply. Not relief, completion. The kind of exhale that empties out everything old and leaves room for the new. The storm had passed. Not the dramatic kind, not the cinematic one with thunder and lightning, but the internal kind. The storm of betrayal, anger, and retribution. And what remained wasn't wreckage. It was space. Space to breathe. To exist. The next morning, I woke early. For once, I didn't reach for my phone or check the news. I made coffee, stood barefoot on the porch, and watched the sunrise. The sky was streaked with pink and silver, the kind of color that makes you believe in fresh starts, even if you don't say it aloud. Neighbors waved as they left for work. Patty yelled from across the street, "Morning, Laura. Big weekend plans?" "Not this time," I called back. "I think I'll just let the world spin without me for a bit." She laughed. "You've earned it." Maybe I had. When I went back inside, sunlight filled the kitchen, bouncing off the polished counters. I opened my laptop. Not to draft strategies or lawsuits, but to write something personal for the first time in months. Just a sentence, typed into a blank document. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize you were the foundation all along. I stared at it for a long time, then saved the file under a simple name, Closure. No one else would ever read it. It wasn't for them. It was for me. Later that day, I met Claire for lunch downtown. She was buzzing with excitement about a new contract we'd just landed. "We're unstoppable," she said, grinning as she handed me a copy of the deal. I smiled back. "We're steady. That's better." "Still," she said, tilting her head. "What's next for you, Laura? Personally, I mean." I thought for a moment. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe just peace. She raised her glass. "To peace, then." "To peace," I echoed, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a toast, it felt like truth. That evening, I drove back home as the sun dipped low. The sky glowed gold over the rows of houses, each one reflecting a perfect illusion of serenity. The same lawns, the same fences, the same carefully edited lives. Only now, I saw through them all, not with judgment but understanding. Because behind every flawless window was someone hiding something they thought would destroy them. I knew better now. Some destruction is liberation in disguise. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and stepped inside my house. For the first time since everything began, it didn't feel like the end of a story. It felt like the beginning of a life. The world outside hummed quietly, ordinary and eternal. And as I turned off the lights and stood by the window, watching the last streak of light fade, I smiled. Calm, certain, whole. No epilogue, no moral, no promises. Just the quiet hum of victory disguised as peace. The storm was over, and I was still standing, steady, strong, and entirely my own.